Welcome to episode 3 of He's a Giant, a pod about all things Giants football and all things college football, brought to you by Monte and Sal. Monty, how's it going, man?
Been better, Sal. I've been better. How you doing?
I got the old school throwback jersey on to make me feel better
There we go.
because
I got West
because
Virginia on because we're playing Pitt, so eat shit, Pitt.
the old rivalry game. I love it.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I got my LT jersey on mainly because, partially because we're going over edge rushers today, and we'll get to
Yes,
that in a
yeah.
little bit. But I just wanted to wear the jersey of a team that I remember being very happy watching. That was a
Oh
rough one.
man.
Yeah, we're coming off the heels of our opening game against the Cowboys. I know we all went into it with a lot of hope building
hmm
up from the season, and we just got our asses beat all over the field, 40-0. Just a
Yep.
brutal loss. I think now that we've had a couple of days to digest it, tell me your thoughts. What's your take home, and just where are you with this right now?
Sure. I mean, there's a ton to say about it, but I'll say one thing. There's a lot of conversations this entire offseason, especially about this game in particular, because it was week one. I think a lot of fans kind of didn't take Dallas seriously enough. I was always in the camp that they're one of the top teams in the NFC. I thought it was the 49ers, Eagles, and Dallas. I thought those three were still the clear top. I didn't necessarily think the Giants closed the gap, but I felt that the Giants put themselves in a position where they could compete with, top level teams and be even though they're not in the same level, they can go ahead and be in those games and give themselves a chance. Clearly, that is not what happened week one. We
Ooh.
got embarrassed. And it felt like everything that could go wrong went wrong. Like it was just like even fourth quarter, Isaiah Hodgins catches a ball, he fumbles. Like it's just like every single thing that could have gone wrong just kept going wrong. It was just snowballing, and it felt like the Giants were kind of just letting it happen at one point. Um, but yeah, I'll let you go into a little bit of your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean we've been through this discussion I think 100 times over by now, like on Twitter and Spaces and just talking to friends. I'm with you. I mean, I think I think I've had a more healthy respect for the Dallas Cowboys than I think a lot of our fan base has. Both the Cowboys as an organization, as a team, and Dak Prescott. I think he's given a lot of crap that I don't think is really justified. I don't think he's elite, but I think he's a pretty damn
Mm-hmm.
good quarterback and always has been. Had a bad year last year when he was injured, and it was a relatively bad year. But even then, I think people went overboard criticizing the guy.
Yeah.
I do think the Dallas Cowboys are the best defense in the NFL. I said that going into the game. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think I think they left very little doubt of that after the game. And I think actually that they are, if not the most likely, one of the most likely teams to come out of the NFC and represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. All that said, I picked the Giants to kind of eke one out, mainly for the reasons you said. I don't think the Giants roster, nor did I think going into that game that we're anywhere near the Cowboys in terms of overall roster, like depth and things like that. But I thought that they had at least built up enough of a talent pool, at least on the starting end, that they would be a tough out. And that's how I was going into it, thinking that
Mm-hmm.
they would be a tough out for a tough team, well coached, and
Home game.
vet home game, bunch of veterans, a lot of home energy, the fans behind you. I thought they'd be a tough out and a tough out at home. I kind of was hoping we could lean into the Giants a little bit and get a win. That opening drive looked promising from at least a running standpoint, although when you look back at it, there were probably passes that could have been made and they didn't happen. But nevertheless, they were moving the ball and they were getting themselves into they got in the red zone pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
The wheels fell off very fast after that. It was, the false start by Andrew Thomas, which is very uncanny for him. Although I would say that on that play, the clock was, I think he thought that the uh, the play clock was about to expire, which is what forced him to jump a little bit. But the false start and the bad snap and just in the kick being blocked and the return for a touchdown, just a ridiculous sequence of events. It's just a matter of 3 plays. We can dissect this all we want. It went all downhill from there. But at the end of the day, the Cowboys just flexed and showed they were the way better team. And that's fine. Like they can win the game being better. I think I was most disheartened by how little fight the Giants had in them.
Hmm.
Just rolled over. It felt like they just looked like, when we say things like, "Oh, it snowballed, it got out of hand," that's all real. But like what that actually is, what that's saying is that the guys on the field were just not locked in.
Yep.
At a certain point, our guys were just out of the game, and our offensive line was a complete and utter disaster. You and I have been screaming this for months now. I feel like that we're not a well coached team when it comes to the offensive line. I think it's pretty
No.
clear. Um, Evan Neal looks like a complete train wreck, and you can say what you want about the man, but he didn't look like this at Alabama.
He didn't look like this week 1 last year.
No. I mean, look, there's a reason the dude was projected to be a top 5 pick and a top number 1 overall pick for a while. He was a really good offensive tackle at Alabama. Now, you can go back and nitpick in hindsight and say, well, he might have had some issues with balance and footwork and maybe like the really speed rushers around the edge when he was in college too. You could absolutely say all those things, but like that's, as we were talking about, that's every prospect. Like every
Yep.
prospect is raw. He was a supremely talented player coming out of Alabama. He looked better when he started with the Giants, for all his flaws, and he's gotten progressively worse with time. And you want to give it time this year, but he looks terrible. Um, I thought Josh Azudu was way overdrafted when he was taken at 67th overall last year. That stated, he was like a 3-year starter at North
Hmm.
Carolina, had a lot of versatility. He wasn't a complete train wreck. He looks like a train wreck, although he didn't even play. I never thought Ben Bredesen was a great player, but like I don't see much progression there. And Mark Lewinsky was at least a serviceable NFL starting guard, and now he looks like he's never played football.
Yep.
It's a disaster, and when the entire unit looks completely disjointed and there's no cohesiveness, and it's as bad as it looks, you can argue that the Giants' talent level may have been overestimated on the line, and that it's not an elite unit, but it should at least be an average unit. And the fact that it's not only not an average unit, but it looks like potentially the worst or one of the worst units in the entire NFL speaks purely to coaching. And I think it's time that gets addressed. We've been banging the drum and the warning signs about Bobby Johnson. He was a bad coach at Buffalo from what we heard from our friends in the Buffalo Bills community. Certainly his O-lines didn't do the greatest. There's the whole, we've talked about the Wyatt Teller saga, how he came in.
Yep.
And he had a second-year Wyatt Teller after a good rookie campaign, and then Bobby Johnson comes in as the O-line coach after that. And for whatever reason, the decision is made that Wyatt Teller has no place on a team full of a bunch of really bad veteran guards, and they dump him for nothing, and the guy becomes an all-pro almost immediately with Bill Callahan in Cleveland. There's something wrong there, whether it's Bobby Callahan or whether it is Brian Daboll. It could be either, it could be both. There's something very, very wrong in that offensive line. I think it's time to start talking about it. And I don't want to see the Giants panic here and start trading picks. I know some people want to start trading draft picks for linemen. I don't think throwing more resources at this coaching unit is going to fix the problem of the offensive line. I think the one change that they can come up with that we've talked about is they need to start thinking about making an offensive line coach change in some
Yep.
shape or fashion. Obviously, the unicorn, the prayer is go out and get Mike Munchak somehow. I mean, I put that on Twitter. It went crazy, went viral, that whole give him a blank check thing. I mean it, but I don't expect it. But
Yep.
somebody along those lines, we talk about this, like there's not a lot of, I'll let you take it from there, but like there's not a lot of guys like that. And when you can find one, they're like cheat codes, right? So
Yep.
what are your thoughts?
Yeah, man. I think there's obviously a lot of things you can say that went very wrong with this game. But I think the two things that we were very worried about really got magnified in this game when everything went wrong. And I think that was the offensive line and that was the special teams. And those were two coaches we didn't have a lot of trust in. The special teams with that blocked field goal, which honestly came down to the special teams coaching and the offensive line coaching, because it didn't seem like Azudu knew who to block there and just,
No.
took the outside guy, which you're never supposed to do, and just let them shoot the gap.
Did you hear Carl Banks talk about it?
No, I didn't hear what he said.
Yeah, I mean, basically, he was talking about that exactly what you're saying. He's like that. That's a coaching thing.
It
You
is.
tell them who to block and how to handle that. He's like that's a gimme in the NFL, and it seems like they don't know how to do it.
Yeah, look, man, like I get when everybody says, it's up to the players to execute. But if if you've been a part of a good culture, if you've seen a team that's part of a good culture, the coaches put that on themselves. They prepare the players so they can execute. You don't just say players need to execute. No, you need to prepare them. And those mental mistakes are on the coaches. And so that was one of them. And then, but man, we've been talking about him beating to death with Bobby Johnson this week. There's so many red flags with this guy. I mean, we were saying it. I think Evan Neal has legitimately become a worse football player since he's joined the New York Giants, which it's hard to argue with. Mark Lewinsky looked like a much better player. He was never that good, but a much better player in Indianapolis. And to be honest, I mean, I know it's early. He looked like a better player last year. It's looked like he's getting worse and worse the longer he's under this coaching. You mentioned it was a tweet I put out with Wyatt Teller. He started the last half of the season for the Buffalo Bills after being a 5th-round pick. They hire Bobby Johnson. Bobby Johnson comes in.
And he played well.
Yeah,
for a rookie.
For a 5th-round rookie.
He was solid, yeah.
Yep. And Bobby Johnson came in. He didn't start him. He didn't have a place on the line, and Joe Shane and Brendan Bean traded him. And, usually what that means when you trade him at the end of August means the coaches were saying this guy wasn't going to make the team.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
That's, not just that's not just Bobby Johnson, to be fair. I mean, everybody's watching this guy. So, I mean, you can say it to the point of, but it also ultimately comes down to Bobby Johnson because he's not developing this guy. And if he doesn't look the part and then looks the part somewhere else, then he's not doing his job getting this guy to the level that he can get to. Yeah, man, I never thought from what we heard about from Bobby Johnson from Buffalo Bills people, I never thought he was a good offensive line coach. It was a shame because offensive line coach is one of the most important spots in football, but it's hard to find these top guys. I was hoping he'd just be average though, because you can have an average guy. Not a lot of guys can find the top guys, but it seems like he's a disadvantage at the position. I think he's one of the worst guys we've had over the last few years. One guy I threw out the idea of bringing in, even if it's just as in the same situation we did it last time. In 2020, Joe Judge brought in Dave Guglielmo, and because Mark Colombo wasn't getting the job done and Andrew Thomas was looking worse. So he brought him in. Ultimately, Mark Colombo didn't like that, and he ended up being fired. But he didn't bring him in to replace him; he brought him in to help him. I don't know how Bobby Johnson would take it. I frankly don't care, but I think he should consider doing something like that. And I honestly think Googe makes a ton of sense because Brian Dable coached with Googe in Miami. He coached with him in New England. And at the end of the day, this guy's a mercenary. He will come in for 1 year. He'll help you fix it, and you can let him go. That's the story of his career. He does that every single year. And then, after the season, you can look for a real upgrade at offensive line coach and a long-term answer. You mentioned Mike Munchak. The issue with him being that his daughters live on the West Coast and he wants to be near them. Like you said, if Merrick is, willing to write a blank check, then
you always test theory like that with money. I think that's sort of the approach you take.
He's an elite offensive line coach, so it's worth a shot. We're big fans of Kurt Anderson. He's the offensive line coach over at Northwestern. He coached Slater, Skoronski, and he was even over in Arkansas with the Illinois coach now. I'm blanking on his name, but Belima or whatever. But he coached Frank Ragnow there. another one of the best offensive linemen in the NFL. There are some other guys that we
And
like.
I think we're going to get to the point where we're going to have an episode where we really just go over, you know, coaches
Yeah,
and college prospects. It's something I thought about because whether it's free agents or college, but we can't have another season blown to bits because our offensive line is, forget about being really good, is just not even functional. And you can't do that. The clock is ticking now on this regime. They've paid Daniel Jones. They've brought back Saquon Barkley. They've decided to run it back with a bunch of veterans while trying to rebuild. They're trying to toe that line of, you know, compete while rebuilding. Once you start paying people, like, say what you want, the clock is ticking now on you. You're under the microscope. And you can see the New York media, as ridiculous as it is, they're already coming at Dable, you know, for the stupidest things. But it's what the New York media does. This is as predictable as the sun,
yep.
you know. And so they need to get this right. They need to fix this. They can't let this disaster of the line derail their season. They need to have a functional offense and a functional line. And I don't know if bringing in a new coach now, whether it's as a consultant or just a straight up replacement, changes it in time to fix the season. But I know that if you continue to do the same thing and these guys continue to struggle, what was looking like a promising season coming in could get very, very, very ugly very fast. I mean, the wheels can come off very quickly. Andrew Thomas is hurt right now. He's got a hamstring injury. Apparently, it's not severe. I guess we should start talking about what's going on, you know, going the next game and whatnot. But the Giants are flying out to Arizona for a 4 o'clock game on Sunday, and they got a quick 4 day turnaround in San Francisco. You know, it's a tough trip, and Arizona is a team that I think everybody was kind of looking at, you know, and saying, "Well, that's definitely a win." But are they? You know, I mean, they should be. They should
Mm,
be like with the Giants have no business losing to the Arizona Cardinals. But if Andrew Thomas can't play, and I'm in the camp that, like, if he's got a hamstring injury, you got to fly to the West Coast, play 2 games in 5 days. I mean, that's my 10-year tackle who I just gave a ton of money to. I
yep.
personally would I think it would be smart to just let him sit. Like, the I don't know if his presence makes a huge difference against San Francisco after what we just saw
Hmm.
against Dallas. Um, and to be totally frank, you shouldn't need Andrew Thomas to beat the Arizona Cardinals. But conversely, if you don't have Andrew Thomas on that field and the rest of those guys are a complete shit show, I don't know what that game looks like. And if you lose to Arizona, oh boy, you know, then you got San Francisco. That's looking rough on short rest, and then you got to come back home across the country and face Seattle, which, I mean, you know, they lost their right tackle Abe Lucas today to IR. I don't know what Charles Cross's injury status is, but they just signed Jason Peters, so obviously they're looking for help there. And then the schedule gets kind of nasty, right? You got Miami Dolphins after that. You got the Bills on, I think it's a Monday night game after
Hmm.
that. I mean, this could get ugly real fast unless they get this righted. All the other stuff aside, the offensive line needs to be functional. Um, Authentic, our friend, and some other people have discussed this. You wanted to see the Giants come in and be a little bit more of a dynamic passing offense and sort of slowly creep in that direction this year. But if the line play is going to be like this, you almost have no choice but to just revert back to what you know works. You
Mm.
know works is run the football. Just give that ball to Saquon Barkley, especially against Arizona. Just run the ball with Saquon Barkley, control the clock, play an ugly, short scoring, you know, low scoring game, and go back to like a combination of quick passing game and just a whole big dose of running. And I think, you know, something we were hoping we would not see as much of and see a little bit more dynamism this year. But if you don't have the offensive line to support it, you're just going to have to revert back to that. And I think that's probably their best bet to try to win some football games, which sucks because it's not going to go very far. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
That offensive approach is very limited. But they might have to do that just to not get the doors blown off and have this thing completely fall apart. So I'm kind of expecting them to do that on Sunday.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it's not a sustainable way to win, and I hope that they can try to at least ease into the way that they want to do it. But if Andrew Thomas is out this Sunday, and I agree with you, I think they should keep him out unless they are very, very confident in his health. They should keep him out. I don't think it's worth the risk. You put in Pear or Zudu, and apparently they liked what they saw and the little bit of reps at the end of the game with Zudu, and his PFF grades did come out well, to be fair, as minimal reps, but I think he was
the top. I think he was the top graded Giant.
Yeah, wasn't he? Pretty sure. Yeah, at least on offense. But yeah, I think you run the hell out of the ball. I mean, Arizona, they had a good pass rush. They had a diverse pass rush versus Washington. You don't even really give them that chance. And granted, like the reason they got so many sacks because Sam Howell held onto the ball ridiculously long and wasn't seeing the field. But they did, their head coach came from Philadelphia Eagles, and they had a very diverse pass rush there. And, they use a lot of stunts. And,
their head coach knows our team.
Yep,
he knows Daniel Jones, and he knows what probably works against him and this offense. He obviously doesn't have the personnel in Arizona that he had in Philadelphia, so it's not like it's going to translate perfectly. But at least he's conceptually going to know what he's dealing with, and that's a little bit of a small advantage for them, I guess, in that way. You have to, in my opinion, this game, you had to use the word must wins in week 2, but you can't lose this game.
No, not with what's coming up.
No, you can't lose this game and go 0-2. And I think that we need to have a little bit of humility as a fan base, as an organization, and just as Giants Nation, and just say, like, there's no game you can take for granted. There's no game you can say, I'm not looking at that game. We're going to win that game. I'm looking past. No, like, you could lose any game. We've seen this story before, unfortunately. We've seen it not too many years ago. The wheels can come off real fast when all of a sudden unexpected losses stack on top of unexpected losses, and before you know it, then injuries start mounting, and
we saw a snowball in the game. You don't want a snowball in the season.
No, so I think the smart thing here is whoever's out there on the line, number one, get your shit together and really somehow figure this out. At least for this game, give the ball to Saquon Barkley a lot. He's got to be in the 25 to 30 touch range in this game. Overall, I think I think between attempted passes thrown his way and carries, he's got to be in the 25 to 30 range in this game. It's got to be kind of like the Houston Texans game last year. Just give him the ball. It may not be pretty. It may be uglier than you think it could be, but it probably is going to give you a W. And you got to go get a W in this game. And then if you get a win, I don't care how ugly it looks, you're 1-1.
Mm-hmm.
And you can breathe a little easier and then regroup and then try to see what you can do against the 49ers. But that's kind of where we are. Any more thoughts on the Giants before we move on to our Edge class review?
Yeah, I would just say that, this week, you got the coaching has got to come out and win this game, because this is not a good enough roster to lose this game that we're playing. They were coached very well week 1. That's why they got so much pressure. Who is it? Freaking Dennis Gardeck. I don't even really know who that is, but he was the 3rd ranked edge rusher by PFF this week. He had 2 sacks. That was they're scheming up pressure, and they got home. Our offensive coaches have to find a way around the way they schemed it up last week. And then Wink needs to bring the defense. This is not a good offense. He needs to take advantage of that he's not playing against a very good quarterback, and they need to honestly score points on defense. Even if it's not a pick 6 or
get the ball back.
But get the ball back, get it in range where we can score, even if it's just a field goal. Get us in the scoring position with that defense, and we're going to be in good shape. I hope Graham Gano is okay. I know he's limited right now. But yeah, that's all I have, man. We got to win this.
Yeah.
It's a must-win game. We should win this game, but you don't take them for granted.
I'll add one last bit to close this out.
Yep.
And it's a rant I went on the Spaces today. I'm definitely more fired up in Spaces daytime. I was pretty disgusted. That video came out of the
Oh,
Cowboys
yeah.
doing the Oprah thing. You get a sack, you get a sack, on our field. And they're doing that and actually doing that and dancing and laughing at our organization, and meanwhile on the field, our quarterback, say what you want about him. I mean, very well, wasn't my choice to bring him back. He wasn't my guy. I would have walked away from Daniel Jones.
Yep.
Um, Simply because I wanted us to kind of just accept the rebuild, and it's it's a long, tough slog, and I didn't quite understand the prospects of paying him through it unless you believe that he was going to become a top tier guy. Once they paid him, I had to sort of think do they? I guess they think he's going to be a top tier guy, so
Yep.
we'll see. But man, that guy was getting his head beat in, and Brian Dable leaves Daniel Jones out there to take a beating. Number one, which was bizarre.
Wild. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's your franchise quarterback,
Who you just
and you
paid,
leave
and you
and you're leaving him out there with
so
your
highly
with your
about.
and you're leaving him out there in a 30 something to nothing game in the fourth quarter with the second like group O line getting his head kicked in. Insane choice, and I wish he had been asked more about and I wish he had been asked about that more in more detail. But the other part of it is really the players. What really bothered me was I saw that video of the Cowboys guys fired up and basically just taking a piss all over MetLife. Where were our guys? They come into your house, they're beating you around. Okay, they're better than you. Fine. Are they 40 to nothing better than you? On your field, they're laughing at you. They're beating the shit out of your quarterback. He's taking a beating, and you just sit there and do nothing. Nothing. There was zero fight. Not one guy stepped up and tried to even start a fight. I mean, I for a hot second, I missed Kadarius Toney. At least he threw a punch. Nobody had any fight in them. Nothing. There was not one person who stepped up with their quarterback getting beat up and tried to hit somebody else and try to send a message I don't care if what you're doing to my quarterback is legal. You're beating him up. Stop beating him up. I'm going to beat you up. There was nothing. They were flaccid. And I couldn't understand all of this hype that they had been building up about themselves, and that's how they responded to getting punched in the face, was just to roll over and play dead while their teammate was getting slaughtered next to them. They were pretending they were dead so they wouldn't get hurt. It was a terrible scene. And I don't know if that was a point of discussion in the locker room or not, but it better have been.
Yeah.
It better have been that you guys rolled over and died while your quarterback was getting his head beat in, while this team was getting destroyed and our fan base was getting embarrassed. You rolled over and died. Don't ever do that shit again. Don't embarrass us again like that. Anyway,
I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
The Cardinals were taking a lot of cheap shots on Washington last week. If they try that again, they better not roll over and just let that happen. There was one play where they tackled Howell and the defender stuck his legs around Howell's
I saw that
and rolled him over like alligator rolled him.
No, I saw that play, and I think that's a Rich Gannon thing. Rich Gannon, I mean, a Gannon thing. But if they try to take any cheap shots on our guys, whether it's Jones, Barkley, whoever, I need to see one of our guys go over and hit somebody so hard that they fall in a way where their knee is compromised. I'm not advocating taking out somebody's ACL or whatever, but you should make them know that there are repercussions for cheap shots on your players or just taking the teeing off on your guys. You need to stand up and fight.
I'll say that's the thing I missed about Nick Gates. You can say what you want about him as a player, but him as a teammate he was a real teammate. He was a real one to those guys.
Do we have one of those guys on this roster?
Yeah, I mean,
do we have a leader on this roster? I mean, we have 10 captains. Do we have a leader though? Yep. And I think that's going to have to be, we're going to have to figure that out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's stop it there. We went a little longer in the Giants because I think we felt like we needed to. But we're going to get into episode 3 of He's a Giant Edge Class Review, 2024 draft class. I'm going to say it earlier this time. Thank you to everybody who has been tuning in on YouTube, on Apple, on Spotify to listen to the podcast, watch it, and thanks for the reviews. We love you guys. You guys are awesome. Give us feedback. We've already done wide receivers and defensive linemen. We're going to edge next, because we feel like it's an area that number one is important. Number one is really good in this class. Then I say number one twice. Number one is good. Number two is good in this class, and number three is something the Giants might be in the market for. So we picked up 5 guys again and a couple of sleepers. Monty, you want to kick off our first guy at the top of our list?
Sure. So let me go ahead and just pull it up for us. So the first guy that we're going to go over is a guy by the name of Jared Verse, and he is out of Florida State. Hang on. Is this popping up? All right. Out of Florida State. All right, we'll just go ahead and roll with it. So he is a fifth-year player. He started out at Albany. He was a junior college guy, I believe, or something. He was a smaller guy, FCS, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a 0-star recruit. He got no FBS offers. He and he's 6'4", 260 pounds. He had 48 tackles last year, 17 tackles for loss, 9 sacks, 36 total pressures, 22.6 pass rush win rate, 27.3 missed tackle percentage. So, kind of high, but it's a little bit different for these edge guys than it was for like an interior defensive lineman, like we talked about last week. And then 82.4 PFF score, 72.1 run grade from PFF, and a 88.6 pass rush grade. So a lot of really good numbers there from Jared Verse. He's a really good player and definitely one of the most complete players in this class. But I'll let you give a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so Jared Verse is a really interesting guy. I think it's important to note that if he was eligible to declare last year, and had he declared in the draft, I think the consensus view around the draft community was that he was the second best edge rusher in that class. So probably second only to Will Anderson from Alabama. If you guys remember, the guy who went the second highest drafted edge rusher last year was Tyree Wilson, who went to the Raiders. I think it's pretty clear that was Jared Verse's spot.
Yep.
He was viewed as a better prospect even last year than Tyree Wilson. But he when you watch him, he's unblockable at times. Like you watch him through games, he's such an advanced technician as an edge rusher in terms of pass rushing moves and repertoire. He's also ridiculously strong and yoked up. He sets an incredibly firm edge in the run game. He can't get blocked by tight ends. He's explosive. His first step is really quick. He converts speed to power. I have some notes here. He just runs through guys. There are definitely reps where you see him like taking on tackles head on, sticking his arm out, and he just bull rushes them and drives them backward and he goes right through them as if they're not there. He's got a pretty good push-pull technique. He's just incredibly refined for a guy who started as a 0-star recruit, as you mentioned. He's an interesting story. He was a track athlete back in high school. I think he was a sprinter, if I recall, but I think he did multiple track and field events, but mainly as a sprinter. He was 220 pounds coming out of high school, had no FBS offers, none whatsoever. The guy ends up at Albany, an FCS school, because they let him play edge rusher, and he starts trying to gain weight. And then the story is, and this was actually something that I think it was Trevor Sycamore told the story, during the COVID lockdown, the guy builds a home gym, and he just eats nothing but like he eats like peanut butter and creatine all day, and he just works out. He puts on 40 pounds in a year in a home gym, which is bananas, and goes up to close to about, he pushes over 260, comes down a little bit from there when he starts playing, but he goes from 220 to 260 in a year of working out during the COVID lockdowns and the COVID year. Dominant at Albany, and then obviously he's getting offers to transfer all over. He chooses Florida State.
Yep.
He only has 1 year at the FBS, but man, he was devastating last year at the FBS at Florida State. And he could have, like I said, he could have come out, decides I'm going to go back to college for whatever reason. I think it may be because Florida State's got a freaking damn good team. I think they're a legitimate contender they are a legitimate contender to dethrone Georgia. More on that later this year, but if you're not paying attention, that Florida State team is just loaded with talent
everywhere. We'll be
Yeah,
talking about them a lot through these
yeah.
podcasts.
You'll hear Florida State. We've discussed them pretty much every week,
Yep.
um, and so you're gonna hear about these guys. But just he's just a great player. He's explosive, like you mentioned. He's got an incredible pass rush win rate. I want to talk about the pass rush win rate a little bit. There are certain metrics that do translate to NFL success, and that pass rush win rate for edge rushers is one of them. It's
Yep.
really translatable. And to give you guys perspective, like anything above 20% in the NFL is like just there's like 3 or 4 guys who do it. It's like the elite of the elite edge rushers. We're talking about like the Myles Garrett's, the Nick Bosa's, the Micah Parsons, the TJ Watts. Like those are the guys who are pushing like 20+% pass rush win rate. When you see guys in college pushing over that, that translates pretty well. So I think this guy he's a top 10 pick for sure in my mind. I'm thinking he's probably a top 5 pick, honestly,
Hmm.
barring something strange happening in the NFL draft. So I don't think there's a whole lot of scenarios where he lands on the Giants, but I guess you never know. Um, just a great player though. I think he's a plug and play impact edge one coming out right out of college.
Yep. No, I'm right there with you. I mean, he is just a very clean player. When we talked about Jerzon Newton last week about how
Yeah.
he was so pro ready, he was a great athlete. And that's the thing about this dude. He is a freak athlete, man. He is twitchy as hell. He actually he made the Feldman freak list. He was number 26 on Feldman's freak list. Some notes from that. He power cleans 360 pounds. He squats 550 pounds. He benches 455 pounds. So, that home gym really came in handy to him. He got those numbers way up. And then
Rack them weights.
yep. And then he hit 21.14 miles per hour on the GPS. So, I mean, that's freaky times. That's wide receiver times. That's insanely fast. So yeah, man, I think he's pretty clearly the best edge in this class. He's got that explosive first step that you look for when you're kind of looking for elite edge rushers. That first step is a big thing. Like you said, he kind of does everything. He can set the edge versus the run on top of all these pass rush skills. He also, I'll say, like, you might be able to see anybody who's watching on YouTube, like whenever there is any sort of like read option play, I always notice he just always reads them so well. He doesn't at all get tricked. He waits there, he breaks down and immediately fires off to wherever side is going to. He has a ton of patience with it. He's a sideline to sideline type player. He has that type of athleticism. So, if they break it outside, he can catch up with these running backs and these quarterbacks and chase them down. Trying to think if there's anything else you didn't really say. I mean, like he explodes through those tackles when he gets them. You mentioned his push pull, but I think that push pull is ridiculously overpowering. I think when you see it,
Yeah.
he can really take advantage of people with it. He has really good hands. He can win wide. He can come back and win inside. But yeah, man, heavy hands, all those type of things you
Yeah.
want out of an edge rusher.
He's a complete player.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's a totally complete player. He was number 8 on Brugler's big board. So to what you said, he will be a top 10 player in this draft, I believe. I mean, like he would have been a top 10 last year. I probably feel as confident about him being a top 10 player as just about anybody in this class outside of, Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison, Drake May. There's a couple other guys, but I mean, he's already proven it. He would have been last year. So
Absolutely. All right. So there you go, guys. If you want the top edge rusher in the class, there's your guy. Let's move on to number 2 in our big board, and
yep.
like
I don't have any issues this time with this one.
Yeah, and again, this is like a lot of these are consensus. I mean, I don't think there was much dispute on who were the top 5. I think Monte and I took a little bit of a different approach on a couple of guys, but for the most part, these are sort of consensus of the guys. So number 2 on our big board is Laiatu Latu from UCLA. He's another fifth-year player, 6'5", 265 pounds, huge wingspan, big dude. He is a 4-star recruit coming out of high school. He was a transfer out of Washington. So for those of you who remember Jalen Phillips and his storyline, his arc, he started at UCLA and was a highly prized recruit and was a great player, then has an injury history. I think it was concussions and a neck injury. He had to medically retire before he came back later and played at Miami and got drafted. Well, the same thing happened to Latu at Washington. He plays 2 years there. He gets a horrific neck injury and is forced to medically retire from football. Takes time off, 2 years, 2 years off. Gets healthy, comes back, gets cleared to play, goes to UCLA, gets cleared, joins the UCLA team, and he got back on the field last year. And for a guy who missed, 2 years, let me go through some of his numbers. 36 tackles, 12.5 tackles for a loss, 10.5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, a 20% pass rush win rate, 30% missed tackle percentage. So, again, high numbers for edge rushers, but that's kind of what edge rushers do. His PFF grades were 88.4 overall, 67 in the run game, 91 as a pass rusher. So really good stuff all overall. But why don't you tell me what you see in this guy and your thoughts on Latu?
Yeah, man. I mean, so one thing you're going to see with this class is, we've kind of had like a guy who's so far ahead of the rest, and Verse is a little bit that, but I love all these guys in the class, and Latu might be my favorite guy after Verse. It's close with all these guys, but man, he is a very good football player. And like you mentioned, the fact that he missed 2 years and had this type of production off of not playing football for 2 years, off of an injury, is crazy to me. He kept up with the craft when he was away, it seems like. I mean, he is a step. No, he is a technician, man. He is probably the best technical pass rusher in this entire class. I mean, he has everything. He has a really good long arm. He's got a really good spin move. He's got that rip and dip. He's got that cross chop. He's got everything. When you watch him, he trusts his pass rush plan. Like, he doesn't look out of control ever. He just, if his first plan move doesn't work, he has a counter and he keeps working it until he gets through. And he might not be the quickest player in the world. Like, there's some of these guys like Verse, for example, we just kind of went over his measurables. He's a better athlete than Latu is, but when that first move works, he fires through that gap, and he knows when it does. He immediately recognizes it, and he has really good closing speed. I mean, you definitely see some quarterbacks get away from him and some running backs get away from him occasionally, but when they don't see it coming, he will close on them fast and not give them a chance to react. He has a ridiculous motor when he plays. I mean, when not playing football for 2 years might do that to you. I mean, he clearly missed the sport, and he's always going. He can play from the edge, from the interior. When he comes off the edge, I see a guy who is really good bend.
You just see the rep right there against Washington. He's basically lined up like a nose tackle.
Yep.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, he lines up everywhere, man. I mean, speaking, a little bit to the Giants, and I'll even touch on Verse. Verse obviously has the athleticism, and he'd probably be a 3-4 outside linebacker for us. He's a big guy, but I think that's pretty clear. And I think it'd be Latu as well, but I do think Latu might be able to get down, and I mean, even Aziz does that a little bit for us. Maybe we'll get down and put his hand in the dirt on some formations and be a D end in that 3-4. But I think he's mainly a stand up guy. But I just want to kind of throw that out there. There's also one more. I'll throw it back to you. But one more other thing I was going to mention is that he had 2 sacks versus USC and Caleb Williams. And, when you're going up against a guy like Caleb Williams, who has that escapability, which, is better than 90% of the quarterbacks in the NFL, and he can have that type of success, that's definitely something that, pops off the page, pops off the tape while you're watching. You're like, okay, this guy can finish the play.
Yeah.
But what else do you got on him, Sal?
No, you got it all. The only thing, I mean, I would just kind of add to that and just say to the technically refined portion of it, like there's just things he does in his game that kind of speak to it. Like he's really good. Like you can't get your hands on the guy. You watch him. He keeps tackles hands off him. He just slaps them away. He just never gets leveraged down out of a play. He's got a complete pass rush repertoire, as you were saying. Coming from the interior, coming from the outside, he's kind of got everything technically. I mean, he plays like a guy who was shadow boxing his edge rush moves while the guy was waiting to get back on the field, right? Like it's amazing how refined he is. Like he worked on this stuff. Clearly, he had to. Like where else did he get all this, right? When he was away from the game, he's like sitting there like pretending he's edge rushing, and so phenomenal thing. The phenomenal player. I don't think there's much doubt that he's a first round talent, probably like a top 10 to top 15 talent. Here's the thing: you miss 2 years and have to medically retire due to a severe neck injury.
Yep.
You're not going to be on everybody's big board.
Probably not the Giants.
And the Giants are not known for taking guys like this. Forget about early. They don't take guys like this ever. So I have a hard time seeing, even though he sort of fits the prototypical mold of what would really do well in a Wink Martindale system, I just have a hard time seeing the Giants taking a swing on a guy with this medical history. Somebody will, and chances are whoever does is going to get themselves, like a Pro Bowl caliber player.
Yep. And I mean, I think you nailed it. I mean, Jalen Phillips, I believe, I don't remember exactly, but I believe he was more of a concussion issue. This guy's neck. So I mean, he could really fall, man. That's scary. So I think it was back too. That's some really scary stuff. I don't see the Giants being the ones that take a chance. I only said I think he's a first round talent, but
I can see him fall.
Yeah. If we're watching the NFL draft and he's still sitting there day 3, I won't be surprised, as much as I don't think it's fair for his talent.
And I can also see him going like top 15.
Yep.
Jalen Phillips went, I think, like 17 or 18 overall, something like that.
Something like that, right before our pick at 20.
Yeah, I can see him going somewhere in that range also, because he's just so good. But he's
such a good player.
That's Latu. I think you're taking. If you have any other thoughts, and then I think you introduced the third guy.
Yep. No, I'll go ahead and introduce our third guy. But he's a good player. But unfortunately, there's a lot of good edge rushers in this class. So I'll go ahead and I'll pull up our next guy, and I'll go ahead and set you up for this one, because I know this is somebody that you're a big fan of. So this guy's name is Chop Robinson. He is an edge rusher out of Penn State. Chop Robinson, he's only a third-year player, so we've had a couple fifth years we've talked about. He's only in his third year. He actually was a transfer from Maryland after his true freshman year, and he went to Penn State. He's 6'3", 255 pounds. He was a 4-star recruit, and last year he had 26 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks, 48 pressures, good amount there, 26.1 missed tackle percentage, so pretty much on par, honestly a little bit lower than what we've talked about so far, 20.9 pass rush win rate, so again, he got over that 20 that we really look for with these great guys. He had a 90.6 PFF grade last year, 72.6 versus run, so still a solid run, and then 92.4 pass rush. So, very productive, good player, even though it doesn't always show up in the stat sheet. He was very disruptive is probably the word you use for him. But why don't you take it there, Sal? Tell us about Chop.
Yeah, I have another word for him in my notes. It's psychopath. This guy, this guy plays like an absolute maniacal beast on the field. So he, you look at him and he's diminutive. He's diminutive, right? He's not a big guy. He's only 6'3". He has short arms. And I think that you can see it. You don't have to measure. Like, you can just see on the tape. He's smaller than the guys out there. Like, he's smaller than his teammates. He's smaller than the linemen he's going up against. Once you get over the visual effect of him being a smaller guy and you watch him play, all you see is a guy who's an absolute freak and a psychopath that just takes over football games. And that's exactly what he does. He completely takes over football games. It's exactly what you want in a game disrupting edge rusher. He is so powerful. This guy plays with leverage. He's small, but he takes advantage of it. He plays low to the ground. He's got freakish strength and freakish athleticism stemming from his lower body. And he just uses that lower body strength to just run right through guys. He's just ridiculously fast with his first step. His speed to power is insane. And like you said, he's younger than the other guys. He doesn't have a fully developed pass rush repertoire. So that 20% pass rush win rate, that's almost all speed to power. Like, pretty much all of it is just him bull rushing dudes just with leverage, right? Like, he's just small and he's just coming at them with like rapid speed to power, boom, 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 knocking them backwards, getting in the backfield and taking out quarterbacks. But he doesn't just do it in the pass game. Like, he will do this in the run game. He's so fast. He'll just run around the backfield, disrupt the run game, disrupt the pass game. His motor is insane. He has the hottest motor of any one of these guys. He's just an absolute maniac. So when you're watching games, if you want to tune into a Penn State game, you don't have to look hard. You're going to notice 44. Yeah. He's going to be on your field. He's going to pop right away. And at some point, you need to get guys like this on your team. Forget his size, his arm length. I mean, this is a guy, Monty, who teams are going to overthink this. This is the overthink it guy, right? They're going to be like, oh, his arm length, look at his size. I don't know. Can he be an edge rusher in the NFL against the beasts that are lining up his offensive tackle? Yeah, he can, and he'll be really good. And he'll figure it out because he's so damn quick and strong. But the teams will overthink this, and teams are going to let this guy fall. Like, as much as I think this guy should be right up there in like that top 10 to 15 discussion, I can see him falling because of his stature. But the way he plays football, you need guys like this on your team if you're going to win a Super Bowl. Like, and that's what this comes down to, right? You're trying to put together a roster of guys who are going to not only be great players for you, but the kind of guys who win big games and big moments and get you to the promised land. Every team needs a Chop Robinson. You need a guy like this on your team. So I would be ecstatic if the Giants landed Chop Robinson. I love the way this guy plays football. What, you have any other thoughts on this guy?
Yeah, I mean, definitely nailed it. He is not going to be hard to miss. He'll be the guy that's not wearing any gloves or sleeves or anything like that out there.
He's insane.
Yeah, it just adds to it. When you look at him, he looks like a JV football player the way he's dressed up out there. But then he said he's a psychopath, man. He doesn't seem like. And I don't mean this in a bad way because it's going to sound bad. He doesn't look like he necessarily has a plan sometimes. He's just
running around.
He just wants to kill someone. Like,
yeah.
He has great instincts. He has great speed, great strength, great vision. It works for him. But like, I don't necessarily feel like he always has the plan when he's going into it. He's just I'm gonna get to the ball. He's like water boy. Like,
yeah, he is the water boy. That is a great comp. He just put him somewhere. He's Bobby Boucher. Just put him somewhere on the field and just just tell him that there's something wrong with his medulla oblongata. He'll go kill someone for it.
But no, he is a great player. He's super athletic. I think one comp you're going to end up seeing, it's not a fair comp to put on. Let's be fair. Let's make it straight. But it's going to comp I think you'll end up seeing is another guy out of Penn State who's a freak athlete who has short arms and is an edge rusher. The guy named just killed us this week in Michael Parsons. He was seen as an off-ball linebacker, but part of the reason they didn't think he'd succeed as an edge rusher because he has short arms. And
exactly.
So
he's overthought it.
That you can succeed. He's not Micah Parsons. So let's get that straight. That's not a fair comp for him. But I will. With that said, He is a freak. He is also a freak. He was number 9 on Feldman's freak list. He reportedly runs a 4.47. So keep that in mind. He does that at what was it? 255 pounds. Runs a 4.47. He runs a 4.22 shuttle, which is faster than Micah Parson ran, for the record. Broad jumps 10.7, 10 feet 7 inches, and he bench presses 400 pounds. So this guy is a freak athlete. He has he's fucking violent hands. He's just, I mean, it just goes with his like psychopath behavior where his hands are like mallets when he's coming through.
He's the guy that we needed on the field on Sunday night. Like, if you want to be real about this, like, to turn the tide of that game on Sunday night, we needed a Chop Robinson on the field. That's what I was talking about. You need somebody who's going to go out there and try to hurt somebody on the other team to try to turn that game around. He's a game wrecker.
He's a game wrecker. And I'll say the difference between a lot of these guys, he's an untapped player. He is a guy that there's a lot to grow for him. He is not nearly at what his ceiling is. He is still more of a disruptor than a production type guy. That's a couple guys in this, but I really like him. If you want to watch a game, go watch him versus Auburn. He took over that game. He only had 1 sack, but he had 9 pressures in that game. He ended up walking away with a 95.2 pass rush grade, and keep in mind, against an SEC team, but also, I mean, he plays in the Big Ten. The offensive line is different in the Big Ten, and he gets a lot of competition. He's 15 on Brugler's big board, so Brugler's a big fan of him. You're gonna have to spend a first-round pick to get him, but he is a great player. I saw one comp for him, potentially maybe like a Carl Lawson. He was kind of a stout guy, shorter arms, really good athlete. So, they don't have necessarily the same play style, but from a prototype, I think it kind of fits. But
Jermaine Johnson, Carl Lawson, these guys, they're in that mold. Except I would argue that the way he plays the game is just another level of insane violence, and you just need that. You need that on your team. Yeah.
Right,
awesome. So one to watch, and we'll get into the game they're playing a little later. But why don't we go to number 4? I'll introduce him.
Yep.
So the 4th guy on our list is another guy that I am very, very high on for a similar reason. So, and I think this is where Monte and I diverge a little from the consensus in terms of our rankings. But we both love this guy. So this is Bralen Trice. He is a another fifth-year player out of Washington. 6'4", 274 pounds. So he's bigger than the other guys. I'll read off some of his stats from last year to you guys. 38 tackles, 12 tackles for a loss, 9 sacks, 70 pressures. 70. That's nuts.
Insane.
18 of those pressures came in one game. I don't know if you knew that stat. One game against Oregon State, the dude had 18 actual pressures by himself.
I think it was Washington State.
Was it Washington State?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. It was against Cam Ward. Yeah, Washington State. 18 pressures, 15 quarterback hits, 32.6 missed tackle percentage. So again, we're in that crazy high number, but again, that's edge rushers. His pass rush win rate. Remember, I said 20% plus is good. 26.2% pass rush win rate. He had an 88.5 overall PFF grade, 65.4 run grade, and a 91.3 pass grade. So he is just blowing up the stats. He's blowing up the analytics. He is a data darling. But I love the guy. Tell me what your thoughts are on this guy, Monty.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely a fan of Bralen Trice, and you read off some really exciting numbers there, and. If you've been paying attention to the numbers of these other guys, you might be sitting here a little bit like, why is this guy 4 right now? And I mean, outside of that missed tackle rate of 32.6, which is definitely the highest we've seen by a good bit, really it just comes down to athleticism with this guy. He is not the same level athlete, but he is a very good pass rusher. I mean, but he lives off of that bull rush. I mean, he fires out low, and just absolutely drives the offensive lineman back, and he works all his counters off that bull rush, and that's the main part of his game. And between that and just how much effort he plays with, we've been using a lot that word with a lot of these players, and it's been true. A lot of these guys are all effort guys, but he might have the most out of all these guys. I mean, he will just keep fighting until he's in the quarterback's lap, and these college players can't keep up with him. He is so strong, and he uses that speed to power. I think he could use another move, something to complement that bull rush a little bit more. I mean, I know he has some counters off of the bull rush, but I think he could use a complementary move to that a little bit more. Really maybe work on that push and pull. Something like that might help him a little bit more. I'll say I do have this. I think he's a willing edge setter. I don't know if he's the best edge setter, but I think he's a very willing edge setter. He is a guy who's strong and will set it. It's just he is not the best run stopper. He's not very decisive in the run game. He kind of gets tricked. It seems like he's not quick to make the run stop like he is in the pass game. But overall, he's a really impactful player. He has heavy hands, like I say, just a strong player who is, as you said, he's so productive. And that's just something that you can't teach. It's just that type of production you can't overlook. So
I think the reason he's 4 and not like 1 or 2 on this list with those numbers is purely because right now he's just a pass rusher. And he doesn't set a very firm edge. He's indecisive in the run game. To be frank, like when he's given the responsibility of handling the run, it just slows him down. And his game is just go, 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 right? His game is full throttle motor, get to the quarterback. If he has to change that for the run game, that's where he really struggles. And you watch him; he's like a max effort kind of rusher. He's not gonna. I don't think he's gonna blow up the combine with athletic testing or anything like that. But he's a big, strong dude, and he works his ass off in every rep. He is an amazing pass rusher. So he's not quite there yet as a run defending edge setter, which is probably why he's not higher. He's not an athlete like some of the other guys we just mentioned, which is probably why he's not higher. But listen, if you need a guy who's just gonna overwhelm offensive tackles to get to the quarterback. I'm not going to say he's like a Bosa, but, kind of like Nick Bosa, like at least in the way he rushes the passer, right? Nick Bosa just bowls through people. You want a guy like this who's just going to power his way to the quarterback. That's his game. Now he gets around the quarterback enough. Like his bend is good at his size. I think he has pretty good bend. Like he has decent bend around the edge for a dude his size. Just enough where I think he can keep linemen off balance. But you're right. At the end of the day, like he's a bull rusher, and he has all sorts of moves like a club arm rip. He has all these moves that feed off of that bull rush. But what he's basically doing is coming straight at you for the most part. And these guys are backtracking to try to get in position, and he's just knocking them over with all sorts of moves once he's got them going backwards. Yeah, and he's just driving tackles into the quarterback. You watch him, and he's like using the tackle as like a weapon to take out the quarterback, and that's his game. So, listen, a guy like him, maybe not a complete edge rusher like the others, but as a pass rushing monster, if that's what you're looking for, this is a guy you can see either going in the back half of round 1. I think he's more of like a late round 1, early round 2 kind of graded guy, depending on a team's needs. And I think that's probably where he's going to get drafted, barring a major change in things this year, which I don't see him happen. Like I don't think his athletic testing is going to take him anywhere. But some team is going to say, we need a guy like this to get to the passer, and we're just going to take him. And I think it's going to be in that sort of 20 to 40 range is where he likely goes. I don't know where Burglar has him, but that's kind of where I
He
think he
has him
is.
at 47, and
Okay,
yeah,
so yeah,
I think we've seen it a lot over the last few years where some of these edge rushers start to kind of go on a run early round 2, and that's
yeah.
kind of where I see him. Somebody who wants to get an edge rusher who didn't dress it early, round 1. One of these teams at the top of round 2. I think that's kind of a good spot for him. I do have a question for you though with him. Where do you see his role with the Giants, given like some of his athleticism limitations? Do you think he can play a 3-4 outside linebacker, or do you think he's a guy you draft him 274, he puts on 10 pounds and plays 3-4 defensive ends?
I don't think he's a 3-4 DE.
Mm-hmm.
I think he could do it. Like if you got him to like 290, could he play like as a small 3 tech, kind of thing? Maybe. But I think at the end of the day, he is an edge rusher. I think he fits. I don't think you need two. Personally, I don't think you need two Kayvon Thibodeaux on the team, right? I don't think you need two guys who can do everything where they can rush the passer and drop into coverage, and play like true outside linebacker, stand up. I don't think you necessarily need those guys. I think you want to have somebody who is knocking tackles backwards, which is something we really don't have on the edge right now, right? Like Kayvon, I think is developing that. Hopefully, he'll get better at that this year, and hopefully, we'll see that from Aziz. But right now, we don't have a bona fide guy who's just going to bull rush into the quarterback, and I think that is something we're definitely missing on our defense. So, to me, he's a starting edge outside of Kayvon, and you can rotate him with Aziz Ojulari. I can see sub packages where he lines up as as like you're saying, either as a defensive end
Mm-hmm.
or as an edge rusher, and you just have two edge rushers on the same side, where you have Aziz like lined up like as like a wide 9. Like there's so many things you could do with a guy like this, but basically in my mind, he's a dude you line up on the outside shoulder of the offensive tackle, and you let him just destroy that guy
Yeah.
with power. I think that's where he lives.
Yeah, it's interesting. And the other side of this will also go into his draft stock is how he develops as, a run stopper, because I mean, where he's at right now, he's probably situational pass rusher in the NFL. But obviously the range that we're talking about him getting drafted in, he's got to be more than that in the NFL. So it's interesting. I don't necessarily think he's the best fit for the Giants, but I'm sure we have creative enough coaches that if we found a good enough value on him, he even falls to us round 2, I would be very happy with taking it.
Well,
so
I mean, just to kind of play that point you're making, we went over the defensive tackles in the 3 techs in this class last week. Let's say we don't get one of those guys and we lose Leo, and you don't get one of those top tier guys. You get more of a rotational guy later in the draft. I can see the Giants going with just 2 down linemen again, right? 2 down interior linemen and Jackson, another run stopper, whoever it may be, and just getting, a third edge rusher to be, a 5-man front. I mean, Wink's pretty creative, and I think as long as you can trust 3 of those guys to be able to handle the run, your 2 interior guys and at least one of the guys on the outside to handle the run, I think the pass rush upside of a guy like this can absolutely fit that. And I do think that's something we're lacking right now. I mean, until I see Kayvon do it, and until I see Aziz do it with any consistency, I'd like us to get somebody who can actually drive tackles backwards into the backfield. It is something we're missing.
it's true.
And so I'd love to see it. But no, I love him. Like you said, he's a little bit limited, but a lot of upside as a pass rusher.
Yep. Yeah. And to hammer home to what you said, hey, Wink says this is a positionless defense, and you can find ways to use it when you run it like that. So yeah. But yeah, we have one more guy here in our first top 5 that we're going to talk about, and we'll just touch on some of our honorable mentions after. But our last guy we have here, his name is Dallas Turner, and you'll see Dallas Turner pretty high up on a lot of lists, and he's a guy that we left a little bit lower on ours than other people had him, but he felt he had to make this top 5 just based off of how high he has. And I do like this guy, to be fair.
Yeah.
But anyway, he is a third-year player. So again, a younger player. He's 6'4", 242 pounds. So on the lighter side, he's a 5-star recruit. Very highly touted coming out of high school. Last year he had 37 tackles, 8 tackles for loss, and 4 sacks. Something I wanted to point out, though, his freshman year stats, he had 30 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, and 8.5 sacks. So, I mean, those are some pretty crazy stats for a true freshman in the SEC.
Yeah.
So he came out firing as a great player for a freshman. He had a little bit of a down year given probably the expectations. We talked about with one of our Xavier Worthy. He was a similar thing from a wide receiver standpoint. He had a great freshman year and still a good second year, but didn't necessarily live up to the expectations. Dallas Turner had a little bit of that. So to the point of probably why he's here for us. 11.1 pass rush win rate. And we said that's something that tends to translate very well. And granted, he's a young player. He could really raise up that number. But for right now, it's a projection. And I'd like to see that higher. And the other guys all have it. He had 37 pressures, lower end. Here's a good one for him, though. 11.1 missed tackle rate.
Yeah.
These guys have all been in the 20s. Last one was in the 30s. 11.1. This guy is a solid tackler. I know you and I were both watching Alabama this week. He had a very good tackle this week versus I'm blanking. Who were they?
Texas.
Yes, and they lost Texas, but he had a very good tackle versus Texas. But yeah, I mean, he had solid numbers. 73.1 PFF grade, 71.4 run defense grade, and a 73.7 pass rush grade. Very good numbers. I don't have it on me. Very good numbers as a freshman as well. Solid player, has some room to grow, but I'll let you go in a little bit more onto that, Sal.
I think you got most of it. I think you're definitely going to see this guy a lot higher than we're putting him when all is said and done. And even now, like on most big boards, and it's purely based on talent and athleticism, right? Like just natural talent, athleticism. People are looking at the raw prospect and saying, this guy should be a top 2 to 3 edge rusher in this class. And I agree he should be. And he's so athletic, he can play kind of anywhere, right? He can be hands in the dirt, defensive end. He can be an outside stand up outside linebacker slash edge rusher. He can drop into coverage. He can twist to the inside and rush the passer from there. He can kind of do everything. And if I'm what I'm describing sounds like Wink Martindale's wet dream, right?
Yes,
like a guy who can do all those things. But for all of his attributes and abilities and versatility, I think what really stands out is he's just not a developed pass rusher yet. And I think you have to see it happen this year at Alabama. I think everybody's assuming he's going to take the leap, especially with Will Anderson gone. He'll be more in the limelight. But, he's not fully developed as a pass rusher. He's not even close. I mean, he's got a very limited pass rush repertoire. Right now, it's basically just speed. Even the power he generates is generated from his speed, right? He uses momentum from his speed to generate power. Mm-hmm. He's not a guy who's going to get in close quarters and win with power. He's not a guy who has a ton of counter moves. He's not a guy that wins with hand usage. He doesn't do the things these other guys we discussed do. He's just faster than everybody, right? He's faster and more athletic than everybody, and he wins with that. And the problem I have with that is in the NFL, that doesn't necessarily win because everybody's fast and athletic, and they can counter that. You need to have a game plan. You need to have counter moves. You need to have strength. You need to have a repertoire. You need to develop it. And so he's a real developmental kind of. It's crazy to say about a guy who might be viewed as the second edge overall by most consensus people, but to me, he's developmental. He's a developmental player. He's not somebody that I would bring in and think, oh, this guy's going to take over and just be this dominant force as an edge rusher. He's not Jared Verse. He's not Chop Robinson. He's not that guy yet. And maybe he'll become that guy this year at Alabama, but there's still just not enough on film, not enough production to justify saying that. So that's why I have him here. But he has all the potential in the world, a lot of potential. And I can see a guy like Wink saying, hell, if he fell to me, give me that guy. Let me work with him. So I can
Yep.
see him being a giant. But I'm a little less high on him than maybe other people are.
Yeah, and I think he's a guy I might be a little bit higher on than you are. And he's an interesting player, man, because you brought up the points that he's not there yet. But I'll say I get why people are excited because I mean something I brought up with like his freshman year to be that advanced at that young of an age usually is a good
Absolutely.
sign for how you're going to translate to the NFL. If you can be a dominant player at 18 years old, typically means you can come into the NFL and be able to do that stuff at 22 years old. Like that stuff, that type of stuff typically translates. Be good young, you'll be good young at the next level. So,
Absolutely.
some notes I have on him. He explodes off the snap. He is a really fast first step. He is one thing I said. He is a insanely fast recovery. So a lot of times because he doesn't have this refined pass rush move, he'll sprint and run right by a guy, or a guy will go by him, and you'll see. I mean, you just saw it right there on the tape for anybody who's watching.
I'll
He'll
come back.
tackle these guys from behind
Yeah.
all the time. He'll get by them and he'll just turn around and he'll just take them from behind. Honestly, dude, if he could add a good like knock like force fumble type sack to it, these quarterbacks will not see it coming when he comes behind that. He could get a lot of forced fumbles with at least the way at the college level, the way he plays. His closing speed is, I really haven't seen a guy make these many tackles from behind. He doesn't even care when an offensive lineman like tries
Yeah,
to
he lets them wash him. Like it's almost like he lets them wash him just so he can get like a narrower angle back to the quarterback. It's an interesting thing.
They're like, I'll wash you down. He's like, cool, I'll be in your quarterback's lap in about a second. Like,
right.
So that's where you see it a little bit, where he uses the athleticism too much and he needs to add a pass rush move, especially something that complements his speed, because he has that speed rush, but he's a great athlete, man. He looks so smooth when he turns that corner. He has a ton of balance. He just looks like an athlete, and he has that motor that you're looking for. Again, all these guys, that's why we like him. He uses good leverage. Know who somebody he kind of reminds me of is he reminds me a bit of Nolan Smith last year in the draft, who was a freak athlete out of Georgia. He was a long player, and he was a guy that a lot of people felt like he could play off-ball linebacker or edge rusher. And I feel the same about Dallas Turner. I think Dallas Turner could play like an off-ball role. He's solid in coverage. He's a really good tackler, but he also has a pass rush ability. I definitely think the Micah Parson role in this NFL is that he's kind of started. A lot of people are going to like this type of player and try to recreate that. There's only one Micah Parsons, but everyone's going to be chasing it for the next decade. And I think that could give him a little bit of boost.
It's going to get a lot of people in trouble.
Yep. But he's 9 on Brugler's big board. So,
there you go. He's top 10.
Yep. People love him.
Oh, I get it. I understand why people love him. I guess I see it, but I need to see the production match the upside a little bit more, especially when you're at Alabama, right? That's the thing. When you're at Alabama, I want to see production. This is not Georgia. It's not like being hidden behind Kirby Smart's like wall of like mutants, where everybody's asked to do like one thing. I mean, usually Alabama edge rushers produce. So I just need to see him do it this year. That's all.
Yeah. And look, I like all these players. It's tough with these. I think we have a great list of 5. We sent each other our 5 earlier. And it's funny is we actually have the same order, which is the order we went through.
Yeah.
But probably by tonight, as I just, continue to do more prep for the show, I honestly think I have Chop Robinson 2 now, and I think I have Dallas Turner 4. Like, I think I flopped both of those guys. Like, it's just, these guys are all so close. There's so many different things. I'll probably flop it by tomorrow. Like, we truly have 5 guys who I'm really excited about here. So I definitely think we picked the right group, but there's things to like about some that other guys don't
Yeah,
have.
I mean, to
They're all
be
good
fair,
players.
if the Giants end up with any one of these 5 guys, I'd be thrilled.
Yeah,
We're
agreed.
we're nitpicking on the differences between those guys, but every one of them has a role on this team, in my opinion, at least. And I know you can make a case that Bralen Trice might be the one guy who, like, where does he fit? But I'm telling you, I think he fits as the guy who pushes back tackles, and it's something that we could use in the backfield.
I'll say the
For
one thing that concerns me talking about these 5, Bralen Trice compared to the rest. If we took Bralen Trice, let's say at 15, I'd be worried about his ceiling. The rest of these guys, I'm not really worried about their ceiling too much. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah, and I don't think we're ranking these guys based on where we think they're going to land on the big board. I think we're
Yeah,
ranking
yeah,
them
yeah.
based on our preference. Like, it's clear to
Mhm.
me, like Dallas Turner will probably be the second or third edge off the board. Like, I'd be surprised if he's not second or third. And I think it's going to be Verse number one, and then Turner or Robinson 2 and 3, right? Most likely. I think Latu, as good as he is, will probably fall, and because of the injury history. And I don't think Bralen Trice gets taken until at least the second round. I'd be surprised if he got taken in the first round. Like, I mean, you could see it like as a borderline one, but at the end of the day, I think he's a second round pick. So, but
Yep.
like, I just like these guys. So I think it's a good group, and I'd be thrilled with any of them. Um, we should probably talk about our 2 honorable mentions. We're not going to go into too much depth this week with the 2 honorable mentions. But we wanted to do something a little bit different with this one, just for the sake of a little bit of originality. We picked 2 guys who just fell outside the top 5, and it's interesting. The reason we chose these 2 specifically is because they're both at the same school, and they're both lining up right opposite each other. So if you haven't figured it out by now, it's JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer from Ohio State. Um,
Please don't
and
unsubscribe, Shane.
sorry, Shane, we don't give us 1 star for this. It's just worth talking about because they're both prospects at the same school. But let me just go through their numbers real quick, and then maybe we can talk about them together. So JT Tuimoloau, 5-star recruit out of high school, 6'4", 270. He was a basketball player. He had a 9.3 pass rush win rate, so not like the other guys. 25% biz tackle percentage, 75.1 PFF grade, 59.8 PF overall run grade, and 83 pass rush grade. So even though his pass rush win rate wasn't great, his pass rush grade was pretty decent. Jack Sawyer, his teammate on the other side, 6'4", 265, so similar size and frame. Also a 5-star recruit, number 1 in Ohio State's class that year. He had a 74.4 overall PFF grade, 73 run grade, 70.5 pass rush. A little bit more all around than JT Tuimoloau. Both 5-star recruits, but both not. There's something missing, right? Like, they're not these guys. These are not guys who jump off the. They don't jump off the tape for you. But what are your thoughts on these 2 guys?
Yeah, I mean, specifically with JT Tuimoloau, or whatever you say it, he is a guy who interests me. He's not a data darling, as we might say, but he is a guy who's a very good athlete, even though it doesn't always show up on tape. I mean, he had a scholarship to play basketball. He had multiple scholarships, so D1. He is a guy who has a very good pass rush plan. He has, when we talked about who was it? Latu. He was a guy who I said had, probably the best pass rush plan, the best skill, like moveset out of all the guys we talked about. Well, that's really because this guy didn't make our top 5. He's right there with them. He's a technician, and he has a ton of moves at his disposal, and he just doesn't have a ton of burst off that first step. And I
Yeah.
think that's kind of held him back where you see in these win rates. But I mean, he is a guy who I think will be a good NFL player. I just don't know if he will be, a great player. And then with Jack Sawyer, he is a really athletic player. He is. Athleticism is something that comes with him. He's another guy who has, a big motor, and he is the guy who I actually could see being a guy that Wink would like. He plays that Jack or that Leo spot for Ohio State, and he's more of a versatile type player in that front seven who they kind of play all over. He has a good toolbox as well, and they have a really good coaching there at Ohio State. So that's one thing you'll get with both these guys. They're very well coached. The production has not necessarily been there, which is will push them down a little bit. But I think they're both really good players. Just missed the top 5 for those kind of reasons.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think these guys were a little behind the depth chart last year to Zach Harrison, who got taken by the Falcons in the draft. And now you're going to see both of them sort of featured as their edge defenders on both ends. And I think the reason we kind of put them together, there are other guys we could have brought up here, but the reason we put these guys together because I think these are sort of guys who could maybe make a claim to climb a little bit higher. Right now, they're both sort of like third round type guys.
They're actually ranked pretty high by a lot of these guys. It depends who you ask them, but Brugler loves them. Brugler has JT 13, and he has Sawyer 35. So it's a good edge class, guys. I mean, it depends. What's your taste? What kind of player do you like? But there's a lot of edges.
See, I don't see a first round pick in either one of them when I look at them play.
Neither do I.
I see guys who can become that, because they're just really good athletes, and maybe with a year under their belt at school this year, they might become that. But I'm not. You watch Ohio State games, and Shane's gonna like this. These guys, they didn't do shit against Michigan,
Yeah.
So to me, when you're grading an Ohio State player, what did they do against Michigan? Really. And the same thing for the Michigan players. Like, what did you do against Ohio State? And the last couple of years, Michigan has owned that rivalry. And they've really beat them on both sides of the ball pretty soundly. So I'm, I guess, a little bit less impressed, but I see the athleticism and the upside. I would not want the Giants to take either one of these guys in the first round. And I'll be honest, I'm not sure I'd want either one of them in the second round as they are currently constituted. So, guys go up and down, but I think it's worth watching. And you can watch them both together. And I think that's interesting. So I think that takes us to sort of the last segment of our show. Every week we say we're going to make it shorter, and every week we get longer and longer and longer. But I think this week we had to go on our rant after the Giants' first game, so it's okay. And I hope you guys will forgive us. The games to watch coming up this week, we've circled a couple of fun games for you guys. So Miami actually plays tonight. We're dropping the pod on Thursday, so tonight you can watch Miami play. I think they're playing Bethune-Cookman, so it shouldn't be a very competitive match. But you want to see Leonard Taylor, who we went over.
Let's see him dominate. He's going to have a field day.
He's going to do terrible things to Bethune-Cookman, but Bethune-Cookman's going to make a lot of money off the game, so don't feel too bad for them, I guess. Not for the school, for the players maybe. So that's something if you want to do something on your Thursday night. And then a couple of other games that I came up with. You came up with Penn State versus Illinois, which will be on Saturday. That's a good matchup.
And that has some players we've talked about with Chop Robinson today, Johnny Newton from our interior line class, Olu Fashanu, who we haven't talked about yet, but we'll get to him. Yeah, he's a top offensive tackle. You'll just keep an eye on him. And then Keith Randolph, I don't think we ever brought up, but he's a teammate of Johnny Newton. He's also a top interior defensive line guy. He plays right next to Johnny Newton. Both really good players.
Yep. And the other player to watch out in that game is Kalen King, the cornerback from Penn State, he's probably right now the second highest ranked cornerback in this class.
Yeah, he might be one by the time we talk about them. Who knows?
Very possible. A couple more games that are worth watching. These are not powerhouse games, but they're interesting. So there's Georgia, South Carolina. I don't expect it to be very competitive, but it's always fun to watch an SEC rivalry.
Got some good players in there too.
Yep, Antoine Wells, wide receiver out of South Carolina. Spencer Rattler, QB1. Still ticking,
Yeah.
still there. Brock Bowers, definitely the top tight end in this class from Georgia, and then Nazir Stackhouse, who is the guy we mentioned briefly in our interior defensive line episode, a run-stopping monster as an
Yep.
interior defensive lineman. So all guys worth watching. I'll throw one last game into the mix, and it ties together with the two guys we just discussed. It's Ohio State versus Western Kentucky. And I know that doesn't sound fun, and I'm sure it's going to be a horrific beatdown. But
Yeah.
there are three players worth paying attention to in that game, just from what we just discussed. More than three,
Yep.
obviously, but certainly Jack Sawyer and JC Tuimoloau, the edge rushers from Ohio State. You might get a chance to see how they play off each other in this game. We talked about Michael Hall last week from
Mhm.
Ohio State as well, the interior defensive lineman. You might want to see him play, and Malachi Corley from our first episode.
My guy.
Debo more than Debo could Debo, right?
Yep.
He got hurt in his first game, but he's supposed to be hopefully available for this game. So for
That's him
Western
against some real
Kentucky.
competition.
So even though it's probably not going to be a competitive game, I think you can see some fun players in that game as well.
And of course,
So
you
those
got
are.
Marvin Harrison and Egbuka too.
Of course, I forgot about those
Yeah.
guys. Yeah, Marvin
Yeah.
Harris and Igbuka. So you'll see some fun stuff in that game. Three like fun wide receivers, some fun guys on defense.
Yep.
So not the biggest powerhouse like matchups this week, but games where you can see some prospects go against each other, which will be interesting. I think that's kind of it for today's episode. Do you have any other thoughts before we close this out?
Nope. We're on to Arizona, man, and let's get back. Hopefully, talk about a Giants victory, and then go over some more prospects next week.
Yeah, please do not make us do this again with a loss because I don't want to think about it. But a loss in Arizona would be something so horrific. I hate to say it, but it would give me shades of Atlanta 2021. That game is please don't do that to me. Just for all
Just
the
win,
pain we're
baby.
feeling. Yeah, just win. For all the pain we're feeling right now and getting humiliated in the first game, it's just one loss. I don't care. You win a game, you notch a W on your belt, and you're 1-1, and everything feels better again the next day. So I don't give a shit what you do, Giants. Go out there and win that game, and then we can deal with the rest of it afterwards. So go Giants, win this Sunday, and we will see you guys next week. Remember, like and subscribe. He's a Giant Pod on Twitter is our handle. I am Queens_guy on Twitter. Monty is Monte Cristo at MonteCri5TO. So add us, send us messages, give us feedback. Tell us what you think about the pod. Definitely, please. We're on YouTube. We're on Apple. We're on Spotify. Like, subscribe, give us 5 stars, all that stuff. Let us know what you think. And if you guys have ideas for how we should take this show going forward, we're going to be putting in the work. So please give us the feedback and let us know what you think. Until next time. Yeah, send us prospects. If you guys have guys you want to see, let us know. Already some people have sent me guys, so we're definitely those of you who have been kind enough to send me those. It's not that we're ignoring them. We're going to go through our 10 position groups, and then I think we're going to circle back and we'll get to all those guys as the year goes along. So that's about it. Thank you guys. That's an episode for He's a Giant, episode 3. We will see you next Thursday.